Hi guys, it's me Kai and welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be all about my foundation routine. And a good foundation routine is the base for every drag queen. You know, I'm someone who tries to do my makeup a little bit differently each time I do it. I'm always trying to do new techniques and products and shapes and colors. But the one thing that stays pretty much the same is the face makeup. So in this video, I'm going to show you guys all the products that I use and the techniques that go behind my brow cover and my foundation and contour and highlight and all that jazz. So let's get started. So the first thing that I always do before any makeup touches my face is I always shave. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that off camera and I'll be right back. Alright, so I'm freshly shaven and I also went ahead and washed and moisturized my face. So we're working on a nice, clean, smooth surface. The next step now is gonna be to block down my brows. I use Aide. I've tried using glue stick and spirit gum before. This is just my favorite method. It holds up the best under sweat and heat, which is really important to me, but it's a bitch to put on. So I try to use a tool like a spatula or like a palette knife or popsicle stick. That way I can keep my hands from getting messy and it easily just comes off with some soap and warm water. So I'm laying it down with my palette knife and it goes on pretty wet, but as it gets exposed to the air, it starts to dry up. So what I'm gonna do is you can take a little comb. I use a little mascara spoolie and I'm gonna brush the hairs up into place so they lay nice and flat. The idea behind this is we want the brows to lay as flat as humanly possible and up smooth against the skin. That way we cover it in foundations and powders and we can cover up the color and the texture. Some people have asked me if this ruins the brows somehow or if like it rips out the brow hairs, because I mean, I get it, like Aide is kind of a strong adhesive and it looks like I'm being really aggressive with it, but I've never experienced my brow hairs getting ripped out by this. I mean, if it did, I wouldn't have brow hairs to this day. But then again, I was raised in the streets, so my brows are just extra strong. Sometimes you can get a bit of this like gross gluey residue around the brows, which is really ugly. So you want to try to avoid that by flattening down the Aide as much as possible when you're applying it. But if it happens, you can kind of smooth it out with some rubbing alcohol or some water or saliva. Otherwise, if you don't do anything about it, once you put your foundation over top, it looks like you have those like weird lumpy oatmeal brows that just make it look like you have no idea what you're doing. Give that some time to dry, and then I'm gonna put on my wig cap now. And before I go in with all my foundations, I'm gonna set the brows with some powder to lock in any excess moisture from the glue. And you wanna use a loose powder because that's really what's gonna lock in all of the moisture from that. The powder will also show you if there's any texture left or if there's any brows sticking out. I'm pretty happy with the way it looks, so I'm not gonna go in with any more layers of glue. Next, I'm gonna put on foundation. This is the Makeup Forever Ultra HD foundation stick. You can also use something like the Kryolan TV paint stick. I like to use a stick foundation because it's a lot easier to put on and it's also really high coverage. And I start by putting it right on the brows, going upwards to cover up the color of them. You don't need to put it everywhere because you are going to go in with more makeup, but to blend it out, I like to use a stiff kabuki brush like this one. I don't like to use a beauty blender. I find it kind of shears out the foundation, whereas using a kabuki brush like this keeps it nice and full coverage. Alright, so now that you look crazy, the next step is to highlight and contour. I like to highlight in a little triangle under my eyes, in the forehead, on the nose, and on the chin. I don't like to take the highlight anywhere past here because I feel like that kind of widens my face. So I stop it right around here. And then for contour, I like to put it right along the cheekbone, on the temples and forehead, the bridge of the nose, and on the jaw. The contour on the cheeks is meant to make my cheekbone look higher and more defined. On the temple, I do it to make it look like my forehead is kind of going out more like that. That way my forehead looks smaller. And I do the jawline to make my jaw look less square and a little bit more feminine. And then the nose, obviously, to pinch that nose nice and tight. And then you're just gonna blend everything together with that same foundation brush. When it comes to the jawline contour, you wanna make sure you're blending down the neck so it looks like your color is matched. You don't wanna make it look like you're two different colors. The jawline contour I used to never do, but I started looking at pictures of myself from head on and I realized my jaw is so square. I look like Stan Smith from American Dad, so it recently became a necessity for me. As you can see, the foundation brush really blends everything together flawlessly, so even though the contours look really harsh and extreme at first, once everything is blended together, you should look like a nice, multi-dimensional beige egg. Although if an extreme contour is your thing, I'll show you how you can do that later on with powders. I just like to do the creams first so everything looks nice and blended together, and the powders are just kind of an emphasis of the cream contour. Before setting my face with powder though, I'm gonna do one last step with cream colors. This is Nye Clown White. Sometimes I actually use this as a highlight if I want a more extreme highlight and contour, but today I'm just gonna use it on my brows. So I'm gonna scrape a little bit of that out. And you can mix it in with a little of your foundation so it doesn't look like crazy white. Since my brow totally disappeared from the foundation, I like to etch out the highlight of my new brow so that when I'm drawing it on later, I have some sort of guide. And I find it's much easier to do this and give myself a guide later on, because if I mess up with this, I can just cover it with more foundation, which I can't really do when I'm drawing in the brows with brown eyeshadow. I like to arch it up nice and high, but in the beginning, I just put it down where my natural brow starts. And then I'm gonna blend it downwards, keeping the top line nice and crisp and sharp, but the bottom line should blend into your skin. So this is my foundation routine, but I also want to show you guys how I set it with powder and do my contour. So I'm gonna go ahead and set it with powder. And usually I use some sort of mixture between Cote Airspun and Nye Banana Powder. This is more like pinkish white and this is more yellow. I usually use some sort of mixture between these two. Depends on how Filipino I want to look that day. Since this is more of a translucent colorless powder, you can just pack it on the entire face. I'm someone who sweats a lot and my skin gets kind of oily and shiny, which is really not cute, so excessive powder is kind of a must for me. You really can't go wrong with powder, unless, I mean, you're in like flash photography, in which case maybe you should lighten up on the product, James Charles. Anyway, as you can see, sometimes when you put on the powder, it kind of makes the face look flat and almost defeats the purpose of all the contouring we've done, so I'm gonna go back in and add those highlights and contours again. I'm gonna start by adding back the white that was underneath the brows. And I just use a white eyeshadow from Suva Beauty. And I'm just packing this on that brow highlight that we created earlier. The center of my face, I don't really like to highlight anymore because I kind of like to keep the warmth there, but I am going to go in and contour around the perimeter. So I start by taking a MAC Studio Fix powder. This is an NC45. And I use this color almost to just knock off the excess setting powder that we might have on our face. So I go in with a really large powder brush. And I go in all the places that we contoured, but I do it kind of messily. The contour colors I like to use tend to be on the cooler, like grayer side because they more emulate realistic shadows. So I use this color to add back the warmth to my skin because I do have very golden yellow undertones. Now I'm gonna go in with a more harsh extreme contour, and I like to use this Makeup Geek contour color. And then I just use a brush that looks like this. It's from Morphe. You can use my code SUCKMYASS at checkout. And then I just go in on that contour right underneath my cheekbone. And then I also bring it up to the temple, all the places that we contoured earlier. My favorite place to add contour is just right here, kind of where between the temples and the cheekbones meet, because when you look at me straight on, it just looks like my face is like pulled back like that. Sometimes the contour can get a little bit messy right there. Some people use like a card or like an envelope to get a really sharp contour there. I don't really like to make my contours that sharp. They're not really the focal point of my makeup. So what I do instead to sharpen up that line without making it too sharp is I take some more loose powder and I just place it right there to kind of lighten up that area again. Otherwise, if you let your contour go too low, it just looks like a huge brown poo stain on your cheek, which is not a cute look, so I do this to reintroduce those highlights. So I'm gonna let that powder sit there for a nice hot minute, and then I'm gonna zoom you guys in and we're gonna do my nose contour. The moment you've all been waiting for. So this is the brush that I use to contour my nose. It's a small eyeshadow brush from Luxie. It's like the kind of eyeshadow brush that you use to pack on color. Nothing larger than this ever goes near my nose. I hate when I see people on YouTube contouring their noses with huge face brushes. Whenever I see them contouring their nose with something this big, I just wanna hold them by the hand and help them. With nose contouring, it's very easy to go overboard and just get brown everywhere. There's a very fine line between looking snatched and looking like you just had your nose in someone's ass, so you have to use a small brush to be precise. And what I do is I go in with my contour color, the same one that I use on my cheeks, and I go in with it really lightly. I even put the initial product on the back of my hand, and I start at the tip, just the tip, and I softly work my way up to my eye socket. The advantage of a brush like this is that it has that flat edge, so I kind of just go up and down. I think a big mistake a lot of people make is that they contour on their natural nose, which I mean if you want a natural nose contour, that's what you would do. But if you want the look of a more pinched nose, you want to go tighter than you normally would. That way your nose looks nice and small. And I also like to put a little more shadow right underneath the nose here to make it look like my nose is kind of turned up at the end. I don't like to do the whole dot thing though at the end. I feel like that just makes me feel like Pinocchio. If you feel like you have too much brown on your nose, you can go back in with your foundation brush and soften it out a little bit. My nose tends to get really shiny when I wear makeup for a long time, so I don't go anywhere near it with a shiny highlighter. So instead, to highlight the bridge of the nose, I just take a white eyeshadow, the same one that I use on the brows, and you can highlight the tip and then bring it up like that. Add a little bit more contour if you like, go back and forth with a contour and highlight so that they balance each other out. Alright, and finally I'm just gonna dust off this powder that's been sitting underneath my cheek. So this is my finished foundation routine. Obviously this is not the way I go out, but this is the foundation for all of my looks. Sometimes I do a little bit more, sometimes I do a little bit less, sometimes I do it in blue or gray or some other color, but this is pretty much the base of all of my different looks. I hope this video helped you and that you learned something cool today. Be sure to subscribe to my channel for more videos like this one. I can't wait to read what you guys say in the comments, but until next time, I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!